Hey, I'm some bad engineer, and if you grew up like me, there was one cartoon that was a head above the rest. I'm talking, of course, about Avatar the Last Airbender. Now, this show had it all. It had an amazing storyline, compelling moral growth, a coming of age storyline, and my personal favorites, kick ass fight scenes, and an astonishing soundtrack. So I was scrolling Reddit recently and I came across this picture and I thought, hey, that's pretty neat. I want to hang that on my wall. So today we're going to be making a 4 foot by 4 foot recreation of the nation's symbols, with the emblems extended from a backplate with nice recessed lighting running behind the emblems. So without any further ado, let's get started. Now the first thing we're going to do is take our boards that will become the actual emblems, and using a projector, we're going to trace the outlines of the nation's symbols on each board. At this point, we went ahead and drew out the internal design of the symbol as well, which will make it easier to freehand trace later on. Even if it's done in Sharpie, you can cover it up with paint pretty easily. The second step was to cut out all the nation's symbols. Because the things we're cutting out can have some sharp corners and dynamic angles, like the Fire Nation symbol, we decided to use a jigsaw as opposed to a table saw or circular saw. The emblems came out really nice and clean. Before we get to the fancy painting, we're going to spray paint each of the backs of the emblems with a white finish. This way, they will diffuse the light that hits them much better than a solid wood background will. Up next is painting, and we got quite a few different colors of paint. First, we have the black for the primary of the nation symbol. Second, we have a set of light versions of all the nation's colors, used as the emblem's secondary color. And third, we have dark versions of the nation's colors for the background primary color. Now we put on the first coat of the nation's emblems with the light version of their nation colors. During this stage, we completely cover the emblem, and though it might be hard to see on the video, you can still barely make out the black Sharpie underneath. Next, we use the black to draw out the nation symbols on top of the cutouts. Most of the time, the black Sharpie was enough to see where you were going, but a reference picture never hurts. Now it's time for the background. We wanted to have a unifying black border around each nation to help individualize each part of the board. So the first thing we did was create an outline for each nation's section with blue painter's tape. Then we filled that section with the darker version of that nation's colors. Once we let that dry, we can go ahead and remove the painter's tape. Next, we relay the tape right on the border of the nation's colors, using an X-Acto knife to cut away any excess tape, and then we paint the rest in the black accent color. Once this dries, we pull off the tape and our background is looking good. As we do intend to have recessed lighting behind each of the nations, next we're just going to drill a small hole in the center of each of the colored sections so that we can run the LED wires from behind for a wireless look. Now in order to extend the emblems away from the backplate, we're going to need supports. So we cut two 2x1s into 4 parts, giving 2 supports for each emblem. Because this was such a simple cut, we just used a handsaw we had laying around. As a quick note, whenever you attach supports, make sure to run them perpendicular to the light source, not parallel. This way, they'll block less light from being diffused outwards. It's time to attach these emblems. Because we didn't want to have any screw or nail heads visible from the front, and because the emblems were light enough, we opted to use wood glue. Now, just slather a liberal coating of the wood glue on and clamp it for 30 minutes. Then once it's done, remove the clamps and move on to the next block. Now let's talk lighting. Because each of these symbols were fairly circular in design without any major pieces jutting out, we decided to use these RGB puck lights. If your project has a more dynamic object shape, you may opt for string RGBs. The electronics, fortunately, function exactly the same. With RGBs, there are typically 4 wires, 1 power wire and then 3 control wires for red, green, and blue respectively. A common problem with these sort of projects is a lot of RGBs are not individually addressable, meaning they can't each be set to their own individual color. Systems that come with this feature are often far more expensive, but fortunately for us, we had an easy way around that. We wanted the 4 separate pucks to be white, red, green, and blue. So we took 1 puck and cut the red and green control wire, effectively tricking the puck into only seeing the high state for the blue wire, even though the control box was sending high on all 3 states. We repeated this process on puck 2, cutting the red and blue wire, and on puck 3, cutting the green and blue wire. Now if we set it to white, which in RGB lighting is a mix of all colors on full brightness, we will effectively have the 4 nations colors. Let's get the lights attached. Most RGB lighting comes with double-sided adhesive, but if they don't, simple superglue will work just fine. Try to attach these as close to the center of where the emblem will sit as possible. This way, it will be equally bright in all directions. Now we need to mount the power supply box and LED controls onto the back. The control box was so light that we were able to use the same adhesive strips as the pucks. The power supply was easy to screw into the back plate. Next up, we're going to glue down each of the emblems. Instead of clamping this section, we're just going to put some weights on each emblem and let them sit for about 24 hours. So we're done, and it came out looking really good. I'm happy with the overall construction, and the lights play in very well, giving it that extra something it needed to really just stand out. I hope you really liked this video, and let me know what show or game you want me to make something from next. I'm Some Bad Engineer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.